Welcome to the She Hit Refresh podcast, a podcast for women age 30 and up who want to transform their lives by moving abroad. This season's podcast is proudly brought to you by International Living. And my name is Seppi, rhymes with Peppy, and I am your host. So I'm coming to you today, as most days, from my living room here in Malaga, Spain. And today we are welcoming a guest whose story may sound familiar to some of you. So I first met Denise in my Move Abroad After 30 masterclass last June. I can't believe it. I'll be running another masterclass in April, and you can find that information on our website. But she not only took the masterclass, but she also upgraded to our VIP. And just 5 months later, she made her move to the Netherlands. Her story is pretty incredible. She is also a Refreshers Lounge member. And as you may recognize her from her story in our USA Today article that dropped last November, right after the election. I know so many people found She Hit Refresh through that article. And so many of you let me know that Denise's story really resonated with you. So very excited to have her on. You can find the link to the USA Today article, to the masterclass, as I mentioned, and the Refreshers Lounge in our show notes and also on our website, shehitrefresh.com. She moved from the U.S. to the Netherlands in her 50s on the DAFT visa, which you'll learn more about. She recently launched her own project management business, Pastel Fire Business Consulting, and she's a Prosci-certified change manager and now helps businesses navigate transition with confidence. So let's dive in. Welcome, Denise.
Hi, thank you.
Very excited to have you on here. There's so much that we'll talk about today, but let's just take it back to before you moved, which actually wasn't even that long ago. If you could share a little bit with us about your background before moving abroad, what you were doing in your life, where you're from, and just paint that picture for us.
I'm going to back up a little further. I got to go abroad for the first time when I was 18. I got to spend a few days I think it was in Europe for 9 days. And so we were in London for the first half of that and Paris for the last half of that. And I just fell in love with Europe, and I made it a point that I was going to move abroad at some point. I was going to live abroad, preferably in Europe. I didn't know where. I didn't care where. I didn't care for how long, if it was permanent or temporary, but I wanted to have that experience. And then I went to college and life happened. I got married, I had kids, and I went from there. And then in recent years, the children grew up and I got divorced. And then I was working at Amazon and I got hit in the tech layoff in January of 2023. They let go of my entire team. And so I wound up going back to college to get a project management certificate. I'd already done some project management work at Amazon and wanted to go in a different direction in my career. I was doing a lot of data heavy work and I liked the project management side of things a little bit better. So I went back and got the project management certificate. I also looked at maybe moving abroad at that point because, again, my children were grown. I was living on my own and I had been trying to climb the corporate ladder, and then that got yanked out from underneath me. So if I'm going to start over, let's put it all on the table. And I initially looked at Ireland because IT project management is one of their critically needed skills. And so I took a scouting trip to Ireland just after I finished my project management certificate, loved it, said, yes, I want to do this, came back to the States. And then it was like, do I wait to get a job in Ireland and get the visa and have that all work? Or what certification am I going to get? That kind of thing. And then I found the master class and learned about the DAFT visa. And I was like, oh, that's faster. And I was thinking about starting a business in the States anyway. So I went ahead and started a business in the States and then applied for the DAFT and got the DAFT visa and made plans to come over here and do that. And so here I am. I'm very fortunate. I am in Heemstede. I'm still learning the Dutch pronunciations. It's just south of Haarlem. I got very lucky. I am in a cute little shopping area. It is, yeah.
You did mention that in the USA Today piece that this was a long time dream of yours. Like you had the dream since you were a teenager to want to move abroad. And finally in your 50s is when you got the chance to do this because you had the time, the opportunity, everything just kind of, it was the right moment.
Mhm.
So this wasn't something that you just thought of in the past few years. You've been sitting on this dream. And I like that you let us know then that the Netherlands wasn't your first choice. You had Ireland was a choice. And were you also looking to have a path to citizenship through ancestry? Was that also an option for you?
That was at first because I do have ancestry that I can trace through Italy, but then they made that change with the minor ruling or whatever they were referring to it as. And I looked at that and I was like, ooh, that affects 1948 cases. That's the case I have. And it started looking like that maybe wasn't a possibility. So.
Yeah. So then the Netherlands came up as we mentioned, you were in my masterclass, Move Abroad After 30 masterclass, which for anyone who doesn't know, it's a 4-day training that I do that basically tells you the what's, like what you need to do to move abroad. And one of the days, the trainings, it's a live course. So on day 2 or 3, we talk about visas. And that's where I mentioned the DAFT visa as a possibility for Americans who want to move to the Netherlands. The Netherlands has a special agreement with the US where Americans can go. And it's a pretty easy entry. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. The barriers to entry are pretty easy to get that visa. But you learned about the DAFT visa and you thought, okay, maybe this is my quickest in then. And what's really surprising is that, as I mentioned, you took that class in June and then 5 months later, you had your visa in hand and were on a plane to move abroad, which is just incredible. But let's talk about before your move. So you found out the DAFT was a possibility. You joined the Refreshers Lounge, actually, which is our membership community. And you found a lawyer to work with for your visa and you got that going. We'll talk about the visa in a minute, but I want to talk about that ramp up because you had a very short ramp up to the time that you decided to really do this and the time you hopped on a plane. Let's talk about those 5 months and what that looked like in you preparing for your move.
Oh, I procrastinated. Do not do that. I left a mess behind. I did not realize how much stuff I had to pack up, and it was stressful. Think about this is such a big step. But I was going through some of my stuff and giving it away and selling it and trying to make arrangements. What do I do with it? How do I handle this? And there's things that you don't think about. For example, I'm pulling money from a retirement account to do this. I do not advise you to do that. In the situation that I was in with losing my job that way, and I had just been diagnosed with a medical condition and wasn't treated yet. And so I didn't have income coming in and I knew I wasn't going to be able to work for 4 months until I got over that condition. So I had to because I wouldn't have had a way to pay my bills. But with regards to that, it was like, okay, they're like, oh, you need to keep an American phone number. You need to keep an American bank account. Oh, all right. I hadn't even thought about those kinds of things. You had mentioned, I think in the master's class that it's a good idea to keep an American bank account. Mm-hmm. But for my financial situation, it was a requirement. And then I owned an RV. I still own the RV and was living in the RV. And it's like, do I sell the RV? Do I keep the RV? Where do I store the RV? Oh my God. I hadn't really thought about that until I was in the thick of it. And then if I store it, where do I live in the meantime? I wound up getting limited power of attorney for my ex-husband. It was an amicable split. I trust him on this one. So over my car and my RV so that he can represent me if I choose to sell those. But that wasn't something that I had thought about doing until I was in the thick of it. And again, didn't realize how much stuff I had and wound up just with everything going on in the US and the uncertainty and the stress of moving, I did wind up procrastinating. So it's never too early to go through your things. I had more stuff than I realized. It was nuts. And I know the last few days was a mad scramble and I was sort of acting drunk. I want to bring this up because you don't think about how much this was going to affect you. Like if something made me giggle, I was just laugh hysterically and it didn't matter what it was. It was just like, what am I doing? And I would start laughing and I would just go laugh till I was breathless. And my son was helping me. My son is 30 years old. And I was just like apologizing to him, like, I'm so sorry that you got to deal with me. And I'm just like, ah. But it was a very emotional thing. And you don't necessarily think about that. And 85% of me was like, yes, let's go. This is awesome. And 15% of me was just terrified. Mixed feelings, I think, are pretty normal for this.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up because a lot of people think about the logistics in moving, right? Of the to-do list that we have to do. We have to make sure we have XYZ in place to make this move. But it is such an I always say it's an emotional roller coaster because there are those moments where you're so excited about what you're doing and you're so confident about your decision. And then there's moments where it's just really tough, whether that's, decluttering and downsizing or just realizing that your life is about to change in a really big way. And that can be very scary and anxiety inducing, but also feeling like unsure, like, wait a minute, I'm actually doing this. Is this what I want to do? So you go through all of the emotions and they definitely don't end once you move. Like then you're on a whole nother emotional roller coaster. So I'm so glad that you bring that up because that is something that I think everyone will deal with no matter how excited they are and sure that they want to do this. Like leading up to your move, those emotions are going to be a little bit all over the place. Mm-hmm. Was there a point in those 5 months that, because you're so busy tackling that to-do list, was there a point where it really hit you like, oh my God, this is happening. Like I'm doing this.
I had a lot happen that last week. I got on the plane the day before the election and a friend of mine, a dear friend I'd had for 10 years, passed away the week before I got on the plane. I got on the plane November 4th. I'd gotten my RV moved to where it was going to be staying and got a lot of the stuff out of it. And I'm looking around going, I've lived in this thing for 7 years and it's not going to be my home anymore. What? Oh, wow. Okay. And I'm going somewhere where I don't know a soul and they may or may not speak English. Most people here do, but not everybody does. And all communication with the Dutch government's in Dutch. Part of why I liked Ireland, I've heard people say Ireland is where my heart is from. And I do feel like home there in a way I can't even describe to you. You can get by without Irish there. Most people, everybody speaks English. So to come here, it was like, what? But yeah, like I said, those last few days, it was nerve-wracking. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I remember in the lounge, you were sharing, you'd give us glimpses of where you were on that timeline or like where you were in the process of moving. You're like, I just booked the interview with the lawyer to talk about the DAFT visa. And then you're like, I submitted my paperwork or I don't know, 2 weeks away from making this move. And you were keeping us posted on everything. And it was just so inspiring to see, all the progress that you were making so quickly, but also sharing, some of those tough parts of what was going on behind the scenes there. So thank you so much for being a part of the lounge and sharing that with us. You were one of the first. The lounge has been open for a little bit over a year. So you were one of our first members who made it to the other side. So very, very, very excited to have seen you make that leap. But in talking about those pre-days before you moved, were there any other big logistical hurdles that you faced on the move, whether that was a visa? I can't remember if you had any visa hiccups there. Was it, saying goodbye to your family? Was it even just finding temporary housing? Were there any challenges that you faced?
Family was hard. My mom was not thrilled. She was worried about me being here by myself for an extended period of time, not knowing a soul. What happens if you have a medical emergency? And I'm like, it's not a third world country, Mom. They have emergency services. They have an ambulance. And I'm a mom myself. I have a 30-year-old son. Cannot believe he's 3 decades old, but he is, and a 26-year-old non-binary child. But as a mom, I get it. But by the same token, it was like, this is my life and I want to do this and I'm going to do this. You're not fond of it and I get that. You don't have to be. I'm still going to do it anyway. So there was that. And then when you get over here, everything is a little bit, everything's different and you have to learn how to do it. And things may take longer. Things may be quicker. Things may be available to you that you couldn't get in the States. Things that you might need or want here and you could just go and buy. Like the allergy medication I was taking, it was a nasal spray. You need a prescription for it here. I couldn't figure out why I couldn't find it in the stores. And somebody's like, oh, go to an apothecary. Apotheke, which is where you get prescriptions filled here. And I showed them the bottle and they're like, oh yeah, you need a prescription for that. And I'm like, oh, because it's over the counter in Ireland. It's over the counter in the States. Oops. So, I had to see about that. I'm still trying to get on health insurance. I do have an emergencies plan. If I get hit by a bus or something, I'm good. But as far as going just for a regular dentist or doctor's appointment, I'm still trying to get involved in that. I was just trying to sign up for one yesterday and it was like, oh, do you have income from outside the Netherlands? Sorry, you can't apply online. I'm like, oh, okay, fine. I've ordered furniture here and I splurged on a bed because I've had back issues. And it was like a 2,400 euro on this bed. And I ordered it, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. And I'm like, okay, our first available delivery date is March 27th. What?
Which is like a month away from when we're recording this.
Yeah. And it's like, are you kidding me? I ordered chairs and a dining room table and I've got the chairs. The table will be here March 5th. So, and in the States, that's really unheard of unless it was like COVID time. If you ordered something, it might be 2 weeks out, but it wasn't going to be 6 weeks out. Yeah. So there's different logistics here that you have to think about. And I will tell you, I just got my business today registered with the KVK to get a KVK number.
And tell us what the KVK is for people who don't know.
Okay. When you have a business here, you have to get it registered with the Dutch government and you get a KVK number. And it's like having if you register a business in the States, you get an EIN number.
Yeah, EIN number. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So that's basically what it is. And then if you want to have a business bank account in that, you need to have that number. And my deadline that I was supposed to have this registered and money in the bank and everything by February 9th. And I'm past that. So I just now got over because it took longer to get a place to live. There's a massive housing shortage here. Managed to get this apartment, very lucky to get it, and then get the BSN. And I got the BSN like February 7th.
And what is the BSN? Because people probably don't know what that is either.
That's right. I forget what the acronym is, but it's like a Dutch social security number. Mm-hmm. So I had to have that to get a digital ID, which is basically a way for you to access the government's websites, to apply for the KVK. So I didn't get the digital ID stuff until like February 12th or 13th. And then I was sick all last week. So, but yeah, I just went in today and finally got registered with the KVK, which is the Dutch Commerce Association, basically. So I haven't technically completed what I need to complete. The lawyer that I spoke to before, I asked, hey, if I miss this deadline, what happens? And they basically said, they're not going to kick you out of the country right away. You're all right. But they might not count me as being in the country. As far as if I want to look at citizenship or something, they might not count me as being in the country until I get all of that done, where I've got the bank account and the whole 9 yards. So, which was a relief for me because I was worried that they were going to tell me I had to leave when I just signed a lease.
Yeah, well, the challenges don't end, as we can see, once you move abroad. Not only is it an emotional roller coaster before and after, but there's always going to be a problem that you're going to have to find a solution to. Because I know a lot of people get frustrated with the bureaucracy and the paperwork and everything before they move, but just, it's great to be aware that once you move, you're going to have to start trying to figure out other problems too that have to do with paperwork, bureaucracy, and setting your life up in a new country. And really, at the time of recording this podcast, you've only been in the Netherlands now for less than 4 months. So it does make sense that you're still in that space where you're just trying to start building your life there and ticking off all those boxes that you have to do when you first move somewhere. Mm-hmm. I do want to talk about the DAFT visa, but I just had a quick question because you mentioned that your mother, she was, concerned with you moving and being alone out there in the world. How did your adult children feel about your move? Were they supportive, excited? Were they questioning you?
My son, when I first said I was going to do this, he was like, "Hey, mom, whatever," the 30-year-old. But I don't think he understands it, but he's like, "Okay, I'll help you. You're my mom. I'll help you." Whereas the younger child, the 26-year-old, I'm so glad that I am here because the 26-year-old has decided to move from the U.S. as well. They just made this decision a couple of weeks ago, and they've They've already set things up. They've got a friend in Ireland that they can stay with, and then they're going to come stay with me here for a bit. I think they're going to spend a couple of months in Ireland, and they're going to come and spend whatever time they can with me. And then I mentioned a working holiday visa, which I think you had talked about in the masterclass. And I mentioned there's a working holiday visa for, I think, Australia. And so they've looked at that and they're going to get that. And they happen to know somebody in Australia that they can stay with. So end of March, they're going to leave, and they're going to basically, they have plans to not go back to the US for like a year and a half. So they're following in my footsteps, which I think is wonderful. I love that they're going to get to experience that. And I love that I get to be a safe place for them to go if they need to get out of the States, because they are non-binary and queer. And I am worried for them. So, yeah.
Yeah, rightly so. You are such an inspiration, and how beautiful that you're inspiration to your children as well, not just to the people who have read your story in USA Today. Let's talk about the DAFT visa, because now we've mentioned it quite a few times. The DAFT visa, again, it's a visa pathway for Americans to move to the Netherlands. And this is a really interesting visa because you can qualify for this visa if you are a freelancer, solopreneur, entrepreneur, basically, if you are working for yourself, self-employed. And really, there's just two things. I mean, I know there's quite a few pieces of paper you have to submit with your application, but really you have to have a business idea. You don't even have to have a running business. This can be a new business that you're proposing. And you also have to put 4,500 euros into a Dutch bank account. Is that correct, Denise, with the main requirements, or is there anything else that I'm missing there that you would say people should be aware of?
I think that's pretty much it, because I'm starting the business now. I had just started my businesses in the States, so I'm coming over here and starting it again. But yes, that bank account cannot drop below 4,500 euro. If it does, that's one of the reasons they can cite for not renewing your visa at the end of 2 years. If you want to try to renew it, you do need to show business activity. They don't have an income requirement, like a hard and fast, you need to be making this amount by this time. I wish I could give you specifics as far as you need to have this in place, and this. As far as I know, they really don't exist. But you can choose a sole proprietorship or an incorporation. I think a sole proprietorship would be considered, I think they call it a ZZP. And then a corporation would be BV. And you can do either one. And you can change it later if you want. I just went for a sole proprietorship right now because it's easier to set up. It's cheaper to set up. But I can always change it later if I would like to do that. But yeah, you don't have to have a business already running before you get here. You just have to have a marketable skill. When I went in today to register with the Dutch Department of Commerce, the KVK, they said, okay, what are you going to do? And I had to give them basically a quick elevator pitch about, okay, I do project management. So I would be helping smaller businesses get a handle on a larger project, or I would be helping them with their personnel because I've got the change practitioner certification, helping them with their personnel if they're making these big changes. So she's like, so you're doing business consulting? I'm like, basically, yes, or management consulting, and it's short term. I'm like, okay. But that was all I had to say about it. I had to give her a basic idea. I got the KVK number, that like an EIN, but I also need a VAT number. And I was told that can take up to 10 months, but some people get it in a week. So, okay, or 10, no, was it 10 months? It was 10 weeks, I think. Sorry, I don't remember. I think it was 10 weeks. So I'm like, so I can't work? Like, no, you can work. You just can't send out an invoice until you get that number. And
so no, you can't get paid. It's always something. It's always like a catch-22 somewhere. But this is the great thing I think about this DAFT visa is that you don't need to have a profitable business yet to apply for it. And if I'm not mistaken, you can apply for this from the Netherlands, or you can apply before you go. Is that correct?
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if it's better to apply once you get here or better to apply first. I applied first. If you're already here, then you've got boots on the ground and you can pursue some of the stuff. And I didn't do that because I applied from the States. But yes, you can do either one.
Well, if anyone's interested in the DAFT visa, I do have information on it in my visa guide to Europe. And I think it's a great option for people who want to move to Europe, who are business owners or freelancers as well and are interested in moving to the Netherlands. Very important to know, this is not a work visa. So you cannot go to the Netherlands and work with one client. On this visa, you can work with Dutch clients, but you can also work with clients from around the world, but you just can't have one client. So this would not be a solution for someone who wants to take their remote job abroad. You are working as a freelancer or business owner who has multiple clients, working with more than one person. Let's talk about something that people are very curious about and probably have heard a lot of negative information about, and that is the housing market crisis in the Netherlands. And I know you've had experience with that. For those who don't know, I mean, there's a housing crisis happening around the world, but the Netherlands has been dealing with this for a while. And it just means that housing is very hard to find. There is more demand and there's supply. It's super competitive and prices just keep going up. So could you tell us a little bit about what you have found in your experience looking for housing in the Netherlands?
Sure. I contacted an expat service to help me find housing. I contacted like 3 of them, and they were basically looking at me like, we can't help you. We can't help you, because I'm coming in and I don't have an employment contract. And they're like, how much savings do you have? And I'm like, got this much. I'm like, okay, but without that employment contract or without coming in and saying I'm transferring a successful business, they're like, no, we cannot help you. And
real quick, that they're saying they can't help you because there's not going to be a landlord who's going to want to rent to you because you don't have any kind of proof that you are going to pay your rent. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And I finally found somebody who was like, okay, you've got incorporated businesses, you've got savings. Can you pay rent in advance? And I said, yeah, I can pay 6 months rent in advance. And I said, okay, in that case, we could probably make this work. And I was very surprised that she came back to me with the apartment that she did as fast as she did, because I told her, I said, there's so many apartments on Prosci and other sites like that. And she says, the sites that appear there, they're gone in a heartbeat because there's so many people. They put an apartment up there and there's 150 people applying for it. It's gone. And when you work with an expat agent like that, sometimes you get apartments, they'll come to those agents with them and say, rather than putting them on Prosci and wading through all of those applications, they'll come to somebody and say, hey, do you have that? And she came back to me and she said, yeah, I found a place. And I think this is your apartment. Like she said she saw it and she thought this is Denise's apartment. So we're looking at it and I was like, oh, it's cute. And it's in a cute little shopping area. And I had this moment of what am I doing and where am I going? And am I really going to spend 6 months rent? This is like 13,000 euro. Am I really going to do this? And I had this moment of, she's, you don't look like you're 100% on board with this. Let's go get a coffee. And so we went and sat and talked and she was like, okay, why are you here? Why? And I said, what do you mean? She's like, why are you in Europe? And I told her basically everything I told you. And she's like, okay, this is the moment to make it happen. And she reminded me, she says, I had other clients I could have brought this apartment to. And I looked at this and I said, this is perfect for you. And I kind of needed that mental kick in the pants. I wound up actually offering a little extra money, which you may have to do. So I paid 6 months rent in advance and I offered to pay, I think 125 euro above what they were asking for. And I got the place.
Oof. Congratulations. I love your realtor. She's like part realtor, part coach, part therapist. But okay, so I feel like you made the story sound very quick though, like easy though, that you found it quickly because it wasn't. Like how long had you been looking until you found your place? It was months, right?
Yeah, I didn't really think about it when I first got here in November. And then December, I was looking and they were like, you're going to need to pay 6 months rent in advance. And I knew because I was pulling out of the retirement account, I was going to have to wait till after the first of the year. So it wasn't until January that I really started trying to look. And I had finally found this person. And so when she got back to me mid-January with this, I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then we were looking and I wound up moving in January 31st. So again, I got very, very lucky to find something this quick. She has said to me flat out, there are people that have come here on the DAFT that have had to go home because they could not find housing. This is not an easy thing to do. This is not a cheap thing to do. And you're probably going to need to have some luck on your side.
Thank you for sharing your insights. I've also heard of, students, and a lot of students go to the Netherlands to study. And I've definitely heard of students who cannot find housing at the beginning of the term and have to go back to their home country because they couldn't find a place. They couldn't find student housing. Like, that's how crazy it is there. And I know even, if I remember correctly, like, you wanted to move to a certain particular city in the Netherlands when you were first thinking of moving there, but you even had to like expand your search for housing to kind of like the whole country because you were struggling to find a place in your target destination. Is that right?
Yeah, I was initially looking at like Den Haag, The Hague. And then I was like, well, I could live anywhere in the Randstad, which is like the Den Haag, Rotterdam, Amsterdam, Haarlem. And I mentioned that to the agent, and she was like, oh, everybody wants to live there. And I'm like, okay, fine. So let's look at the entire country. Whatever we got, it's within the confines of the borders. Let's go. And it just so happens that the place that I'm in, like I said, this is a town that borders on Haarlem. Again, I got very lucky.
Yeah, I'm excited for you. And Denise shared a little picture of her place in the lounge, and we were all excited to see you finally have your place. But you haven't been there in your new place that long then yet. But how does it feel this is a huge milestone in anyone's move abroad journey, is to finally find your more long-term housing. Because most of us, when we move abroad, we have that short term while we're looking for the longer term. So now you have that. So how does it feel to have your little humble abode there?
It's good. First, it was frustrating because, again, I was like, it's an empty box. And I'm like, I didn't have dishes. I didn't have silverware. And I try to order these things, and it's like, okay, it'll take a few days to get here for delivery. And then it was, okay, let me order, like I said, I ordered a bed, and then the bed can't be here till March. And then we ordered Jeanette said, that can't be here. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And I was very fortunate in that I actually met a man here. That's another story of making friends here and dating. I was dating somebody briefly from Amsterdam, and we didn't really have a deep connection. So that kind of fell through. And then I found somebody else with whom I do have a deep connection. And he was very kind enough to bring over like some camp chairs and tables. So I would have something to sit on. And he's been helping me with going to IKEA and getting stuff put together. So at first it was really frustrating because it seemed like I was spending so much money and it was still empty. I still didn't have anything to sit on. But now, yeah, it's beginning to feel more like home, which is really wonderful.
I love that for you. It's been about 4 months now. I guess I want to hear about, are there any surprises that you've encountered in terms of living there and things that you just weren't expecting? And we can also talk about how the adjustment has been, just both emotionally and practically for you.
My scouting trip was to Ireland because that was plan A. So I did not take a scouting trip to the Netherlands. You should take a scouting trip. And I was really pleasantly surprised by how much I liked the Netherlands. I wasn't sure how much I was going to like it. I kind of fell in love with Utrecht. Oh my gosh, I loved it. So that was cool. Seeing how they do things differently. The people are really nice and they're generally pretty friendly. Most of them do speak English. It helps if you can say "Spreek u Engels," which is "Do you speak English?" I remember when I first got here and I needed help getting some headphones with a microphone. I walked into a store and the salesperson asked me if I needed help or something. He had something in Dutch and I said, "Spreek u Engels?" And he said, "Yes, thank you." And I was like, okay, cool. This guy probably gets people to just assume he can. And just that simple sentence really helped.
Well, I have a question about community. How has it been finding community and making connections and making friends since moving?
I think there's an opportunity there if you're willing to put yourself out there and willing to work for it. I wound up going to I think it was a networking event for people in the IT community. Basically, it was like a dinner and a meet and greet. And then you got to listen to people talk about this, whatever topic it was. And I wound up connecting with somebody who was connected with all of the open mics in Amsterdam. So I'm on that list now, that WhatsApp group. I've not been practicing, but I am a singer and I am a guitarist. So I need to get back to that so that I can go and do an open mic night. I've also found some great Facebook groups that are allowing for connections. Tinder, actually, I'm not sure Tinder is the best thing to use, but that's where I found the two gentlemen that I had dated. There is a meetup group on Meetup. It's Harlem Social Club, I think is what it's called. And I actually joined that when I was up in Alkmaar, which is with public transit. It's like a 45-minute trip. But I came down and met some people through that. And now that I'm close to Harlem with my apartment, I'm going to have to look into going and doing more of that there. So if you're willing to put yourself out there and go to some of these events and talk to people, you can start to build community. You really can. I need to find more friends because I've been leaning pretty heavily on the gentleman that I was dating. But yeah, there's ways to do it.
Yeah. And you will. It takes time. I mean, you haven't been there that long, so you will find more of your people. One thing we didn't talk about, and I know you wanted to share some insight on that, is just making a move abroad in midlife and how that has been. Because, as we mentioned at the top of the podcast, you've had this dream for a long time, but you didn't get the opportunity to move in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s because you had other priorities at the time. But now in your 50s, this opportunity was presented to you, or you actually created the opportunity for yourself. I guess, what advice do you have? I guess that would be my question. What advice do you have for other women who are in their 50s, who are thinking about this, but maybe just think like, oh, this is crazy, or this is too far-fetched, or it's too late to do this?
It's never too late. When you're dead, you're too old. That's it. You know what I mean? So long as you're on this side of the daisies, you're good to do it. I don't think it's a midlife crisis if it's something you've wanted to do for decades. I don't think it's a midlife crisis if it's something you've wanted to do for 5 or 6 years. And if you try it and it fails and you go back, I mean, if you plan it right, what are you out? Yes, there was an expense, but you got that experience too. I would say only you can decide whether or not it's worth it for you. But I am so glad I'm here. I woke up last week out of a dream. I woke up and it was like, oh God, I have to go home. And it wasn't it wasn't a sense of urgency. It was a sense of dread. Oh God, I have to go to the States. And I was really surprised by that. Like, I've only been here a few months and I woke up out of a dream that way. And it was like, oh, wow. Okay. Clearly, as much as this frustrates me sometimes being here and being told, oh yeah, it's going to take weeks for that. Great. I made the move and I'm absolutely happy to be here. You're never too old. You're never too old. Take the chance. I would rather have the experience than look back and say, what would have happened if?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you are such an inspiration. And I guess my next question, but maybe you already answered that, is, do you see yourself staying in the Netherlands long term?
I don't know yet. Somebody was asking in one of the DAFT Facebook groups, your plan A, plan B, or whatever. And I'm like, Ireland was plan A. And then I switched and made the Netherlands plan A. And Ireland is plan B. If I can't get a business going here, I will probably get a job in Ireland because it's a critically needed skill and go there. Plan C would be to brush up on my French and go to our French speaking area. Plan D would be I have friends that want to move to Uruguay. I would probably learn Spanish and go join them. I don't see myself going back to the States long term. I don't know, unless something drastic really changes. I really genuinely enjoy being here. So I don't know if I'm going to stay in the Netherlands long term, but I have to see how things go with the business and if the visa gets extended, because I could always say no, things could happen. But I do see myself being abroad for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, your plan A, B, C, D was all abroad, so I love that. Have you had any doubts about your move since being in the Netherlands? Even if it's just been for a few months, have you doubted your decision, been like, oh, did I make the right decision at all?
Yeah, I have. And some of the stuff where it's so much harder here. What am I doing? Why did I do this again? What? And when I think we all have those moments, but I've not had a moment where I've been like genuinely sitting and brooding on not being happy here. And like I said, waking up out of that dream, I was a little bit shocked at how strongly I felt, oh, I don't want to go back to the States. So even though I have those moments of frustration, and we all have those moments of, what am I doing? Why did I do this again? Yeah, overall, I'm still glad I'm here.
Fabulous. Well, we are at the end here, Denise. I want to thank you so much for being on, but I'm sure our listeners are going to want to follow or connect with you. Where can people find you if they need to?
Well, I do want to do a YouTube channel about all of this. I was either moving or sick, so I haven't done many videos yet, but that's on Tripping the Bright Fantastic on YouTube. And then the business, I still have to finish the website, but it's Pastel Fire Business Consulting.com.
Fabulous. And we'll include those links in the show notes. Denise, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. I hope that we can check in on you on the pod, maybe in a future season, and see where you're at.
I'd love it. Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this episode and leave feeling like a move abroad is even more possible for you. If you're happy with what you saw, I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and leave a question or comment because I would love to hear from you. If you're ready to take action on your dream to move abroad, be sure to grab my Visa Guide to Europe. It's your roadmap to over 50 viable visa options in 19 countries. You can grab the link below in the show notes. And don't forget to get on the wait list for my next Move Abroad After 30 Masterclass, a masterclass for women age 30 and up, which is a step-by-step training to help you fast-track your move abroad. And grab the link in the show notes as well. And last but not least, a huge shout out to our sponsor, International Living. Thank you so much for making this season possible. Until next time, ciao for now.